Welcome to the Radically Genuine Podcast. I'm Dr. Roger McFillin. So today I'm going to take you inside one of the most important conversations I believe is happening in medicine right now, and definitely one that the pharmaceutical industry desperately wants to keep buried. And if you're following along or reading the mainstream narratives about what happened a couple of weeks ago at the FDA panel for SSRIs in pregnancy, you can feel the desperation. So I had the privilege of participating in an FDA expert panel on SSRIs in pregnancy, which is telling in itself. So the fact that I am there is meaningful. So take a second just to consider that of all the people in the world, professionals, medical professionals, psychologists, OBGYNs, so forth. I was chosen to be on that panel, knowing what I know and openly sharing what I share. The fact that the US government, our FDA, wanted me to be heard is meaningful. And what happened during the panel and the media hit job that followed reveals everything you need to know about how the system protects profits over people. But first, let me be crystal clear about something. I don't think this is just about pregnant women, because it's going to be about SSRIs in general in the pharmaceutical industry. This is about how we've systemically medicalized human emotions, in particular women's emotions, and turned natural responses to life's challenges, to aging, into billion-dollar markets for pharmaceutical companies. In my opinion, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about, in this situation, chemically altering developing babies' brains during the most critical period of human development. And we're doing it without proper warnings, without adequate long-term studies, and to be clear, without honest conversations about the risks. So the fact that we started having these conversations, I think, is a giant leap forward. So let me paint the picture of what led to this panel. Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, and I have to give him credit for this, called together experts to examine a question I think that should really put us all on alert. What are we doing to developing babies when we provide pregnant women these drugs? Now, this is critically important because we're talking about the most vulnerable. I think this is low-hanging fruit. When we talk about what we're going to want to emphasize most from a policy perspective, I think it is protection of the most vulnerable. Because when you start, number one, mass prescribing drugs to children and adolescents, we know that you are potentially permanently altering development during key stages. So you're actually creating sick adults by what we're doing during these critical stages. And the simple fact that we're also just impairing their natural abilities to experience emotions, to relate interpersonally. And when you interfere with the serotonergic system, it's a complex system that medical professionals don't even know what they're doing. We don't even fully understand it. That's how complex it is. And so what are the consequences of that? But when you provide it to women of childbearing years and you provide it to pregnant women, now you are interfering with the most vulnerable, which is the unborn. And to me, the numbers are staggering. I think when we're nearly 1 in 4 women who are on antidepressants during childbearing years, that is absolutely frightening. Now, the statistics say use up to 5% of women, up to 5% of pregnant women are on SSRIs. That is grossly underestimated. I mean, that is absolutely grossly underestimated. It can't be true. If you're a 1 of 5 or 1 of 4 women who are on these drugs, and not a lot of pregnancies are planned. And if you are, blessed enough to be able to plan that out, I mean, it takes so long to get off of an SSRI to do it in a safe way. So, I mean, we're talking about a significant amount of babies that are exposed to these chemicals in utero. We have no randomized controlled trials showing these drugs are even effective during pregnancy. And that's telling anyone who says that this drug prevents postpartum depression or treats depression is clearly they're lying. I mean, when you don't have the evaluation, when you don't have studies, like how do you come to those conclusions? So think about it. We're conducting a massive uncontrolled experiment on the most vulnerable members of our society. Based on what exactly? Marketing claims, ideology, professional guidelines written by pharmaceutical conflicts of interest or the pharmaceutical industry themselves. I mean, they fund the major they fund the major medical organizations that doctors are relying upon. So I do want to play the first audio clip, which is Commissioner Marty McCarry's opening remarks about the scale of the problem.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much to our many experts from all over who have come to explore this very important issue. You know, some estimates have that nearly 1 in 4 middle-aged women are on an antidepressant. And up to 5% of women in pregnancy are on an antidepressant. Now, antidepressants, like SSRIs, can be an effective treatment for depression. But we have to stop and also look at the big picture. We're losing the broader battle of addressing mental health in the United States. And as a matter of fact, in some respects, we're going backwards. From a national standpoint, the more antidepressants we prescribe, the more depression there is. The more insulin we prescribe, the more diabetes there is. The more pain meds we prescribe throughout the entire saga of the opioid epidemic, the more pain there was. I'm not suggesting that these medications or any medications are causative of mass explosions of these diseases from an epidemic standpoint. But we have to start talking about root causes. We have to talk about the role of healthy relationships, of communities, of natural light exposure, of other modalities and cofactors that may be involved. We also have to explore novel therapies. SSRIs may be unique because serotonin may have an interaction with the physiology of a woman and a woman who is pregnant. And that's why we are convening this session today. Serotonin may play a crucial role in the development of organs of a baby in utero, specifically heart, brain, and even the gut. SSRIs have also been implicated in different studies to be involved in postpartum hemorrhage, pulmonary hypertension, and cognitive downstream effects in the baby, as well as cardiac birth defects. Now, some women are not aware of these potential health concerns. And one of the unique issues in pregnancy is sometimes you don't know that you're pregnant in the first trimester of pregnancy, and it takes time to wean off some of these antidepressants like SSRIs. So look, we are here to learn. We are here to listen to all of you. Thank you for coming to the FDA. We want this to be a robust discussion where you feel unfiltered and uninhibited to share your scientific opinions and help educate us and the public alike about this issue, potentially alternative approaches to depression and depression in pregnancy, and what we should be thinking about differently from a regulatory standpoint. So I'm glad we're having this. Thank you, Dr. Hoag, for moderating. Dorothy is going to come up, head of the Office of Women's Health, and join our panel shortly. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, did you hear that? So never before in human history have we chemically altered developing babies like this. And that's not me talking. That's FDA commissioner acknowledging we're in uncharted territory. But here's what really got my attention, because he began to address and discuss the topic of root causes. He mentioned healthy relationships, communities, natural light exposure. He acknowledged that the more antidepressants we prescribe, the more depression we see. This is a revolutionary admission from the highest levels of the FDA. So maybe, just maybe, we're not actually solving the problems we claim to be treating. Now, going into this panel, I knew I was going to be one of the dissenting voices. Most of the other panelists, while raising legitimate concerns about specific risks, were still operating within the medical model framework. They were debating risk-benefit ratios within a system that assumes that these drugs work at all. So I decided to go with a different message entirely. Okay, so let's just pause here and I'll have you hear my 5 minutes.
We've been encouraged today to speak from the heart, and I think that is a wise recommendation. I'm actually going to abandon my slides and just try to communicate from the heart. What I'm seeing in clinical practice, what I've seen since I've examined the research literature, I'm fundamentally against misleading people. And so when we talk about depression as if it's this illness, this discrete condition that we can identify, we are misleading people. There is no objective test. When you go into your medical centers, it's usually 8 to 10 minutes. If anything, you're going to fill out a checklist, and you're describing emotional experiences. So what has happened when we've medicalized all aspects of the human experience? Let's look at the fundamental data. Do you think we've reduced the burden of what we call mental illness? Are we better off as a society? You can't fundamentally provide informed consent, which is a legal and ethical imperative, unless you're willing to ask some of the difficult questions that I hope we ask today. If there essentially is no chemical imbalance, right, where a lot of the data is going to really suggest that we're fundamentally experimenting on developing brains, but we've changed our collective consciousness. We've brought things into the lexicon that previously weren't there. And if you want to increase the amount of people who identify with depression or anxiety, if you want to increase suffering, you fundamentally get people to battle their own internal experiences. You learn not to trust your emotions. You judge them as a symptom. You develop fear around them, which is exactly what we have been doing in the United States for the past 35 years. And it's advanced significantly through the year 2020. I think when you look at the actual scope of the problem, I'll tell you what I see in clinical practice. It's rare that we have anyone come into my center without being on at least one drug. Depression has devolved into an umbrella term. It doesn't even have meaning anymore. So it brings into a question the actual research we're going to be discussing today. When we don't have an operational definition of the construct, and it's applied to day-to-day sadness. Because if you pay attention to the younger generation, they don't use the word sad anymore. They say, I'm depressed, which is what they then report in their medical centers. So who do we prescribe SSRIs to? What type of women? Well, 13-year-olds who are going through puberty. The after effects of hormonal birth control. Breakups, loss. We prescribe SSRIs for other medical conditions that go undiscovered. So the harm of this goes much greater than what we're just discussing today because it stops investigation. We're facing a chronic disease epidemic, and we're essentially muting the signals. Right? Does anyone believe in here that we've evolved to experience emotional pain or distress, and that somehow is that's somehow a flaw in our genetic evolution? So I think what I want to do is I want to challenge people to have a different discussion, to see everything you experience as a signal, and a very important signal that if you don't learn to pay attention to, then what you're going to do is you're going to surrender your autonomy. You're going to be in a state of fear, and you're going to be dependent on the medical system. Are we better off by being dependent on the medical system? I think there's an awakening right now in American culture where there is a valid distrust of institutions. And this is an institution that you want to question. Because many of the people that I talk to never received informed consent. And it's too late by the time you walk into Dr. Urato's office. You've already exposed that developing baby to an SSRI. And what happens is we're really good at putting people on drugs, and we're really bad at getting people off drugs. And many women feel coerced. And so some difficult questions. Why are we prescribing these drugs at a rate so accelerated compared to men? Is that because this underlying mental illness that we're trying to control for, one we don't test for, when there's no objective testing, it just is more prevalent in women? Or are women just naturally experiencing their emotions more intensely? And those are gifts. They're not symptoms of a disease. So I'm the one guy, I think, here who is providing non-pharmaceutical interventions. And I know what it looks like to go from severely depressed, wanting to end your life and hopeless, to seeing that as a transformational period. And we can do that if we broaden the scope of the conversation. Right? There's a range of interventions. It should not be reduced to psychotherapy or a pill. So I encourage everyone to ask the difficult questions, and let's lively up this discussion, everyone here today, because the American public does not want to look at graphs or meaningless statistics. They want to have a real difficult conversation because that's what's coming into our centers. Thank you.
Okay, so let me break down what I was really saying there. Because NBC, the pharmaceutical media, sure as hell not going to do it, present it accurately. So I ended up abandoning my slides because I was realizing that the medical professionals that were there were going to be just discussing statistics, ratios, cost-benefit analysis. But I think the entire paradigm is flawed. So tell me, how do you accurately create a research study when you can't even identify really what this major depressive disorder is? Remember, there is no test. You're relying on some form of self-report. This allows for such overwhelming degree of bias that you apply it to anyone who is suffering, and we do. So I've challenged the premise that depression is a discrete testable medical condition in which all this data was discussed in the first place. There's no blood test for depression, no brain scan, no objective marker. You go into a medical center and you spend 8 to 10 minutes with a provider, fill out a checklist about emotional experiences, and walk out with a diagnosis and a prescription. Second, I pointed out that something that should be obvious but somehow isn't, we've medicalized normal human responses to abnormal circumstances. Someone loses a job, goes through a divorce, experiences trauma, faces major life transitions, feels sad, anxious, or overwhelmed. My point is that's not pathological. It is human. But here's the part that really triggered the pharmaceutical defenders. I asked, why are women prescribed these drugs at rates so dramatically higher than men? Because I'm just going to, here we go. How do you answer that question from the mainstream left that wants to divide us on all these issues, right? That wants to create labels and categories and then dismiss you. Well, this is a women's issue. Well, the way you're going to do that, obviously, is there is a man who's describing it. So certainly NBC wanted me to look like a misogynist, which they cut off my quote. But it's a critical question. Why are these drugs so dramatically higher than men? Is it because women have some genetic predisposition to chemical imbalances? Or is it because women naturally experience emotions more intensely and we've turned that gift into a symptom? I think this is anti-human. Anything that has an attack on life is anti-human. I called women's emotional depth a gift, not a disease. And that statement, that simple acknowledgement of women's emotional strength, sent the pharmaceutical establishment into full panic mode. While I was presenting the psychological and social perspective, other panelists were dropping scientific bombshells that should have made front page news everywhere. Instead, they were buried under pharmaceutical damage control. Dr. Adam Urato, a maternal fetal medicine physician, he laid out the evidence. SSRIs freely cross the placenta and enter developing fetal brains. Serotonin plays a crucial role in fetal organ development. We can literally see the effects on ultrasound. SSRI-exposed fetuses move differently. 12 consecutive MRI studies show these drugs alter developing brain structure. Then there was Dr. Jay Gingrich. He presented his research showing that while these drugs might help mothers, there's no evidence they improve outcomes for the babies, and some evidence they might make things worse. Children exposed to SSRIs in utero showed increased rates of depression in adolescence and different brain activation patterns on MRIs. Dr. David Healy pointed out that back in 2009, a jury found that Paxil caused birth defects, costing the manufacturer over $1 billion. Yet since then, 5 times more women are taking SSRIs during pregnancy than before that verdict. Because that information is held from you folks. People like me know it. I mean, I'm knee deep in it. But how many people actually are exposed to this? No, you're exposed to that narrative, the hit pieces from the LA Times, the New York Times, NBC News, and then all the other pharma-funded news outlets. That's what people are exposed to. Dr. Michael Levin, a developmental biologist, explained how SSRIs disrupt the early embryonic signaling that determines which side of the body is left versus right, potentially causing organ defects in up to 40% of exposed embryos. This isn't some fringe science. These are world-renowned experts presenting peer-reviewed research at an FDA panel. The evidence was so overwhelming that we're altering fetal brain development in ways we don't even fully understand, with consequences we're only beginning to recognize. So with all this scientific evidence on the table, with clear documentation of risks to developing babies, with admission from the FDA that we're conducting an unprecedented experiment on fetal brains, what did the mainstream media focus on? Me saying that women's emotional intensity is a gift rather than a symptom. NBC News, a network whose existence depends entirely on pharmaceutical advertising dollars, published a hit piece titled FDA Panel Promotes Misinformation About Antidepressant Drugs in Pregnancy. And when are they going to wake up? Don't they understand that using that word, misinformation, is a clue to all of us? It right away, we know it's fake. But they're too dumb. And they keep using it. Who gets to determine what's information? NBC News gets to determine what is real information versus misinformation, but the panel experts who are there presenting their life's work, but they're deliberately lying? For what purpose? What actual purpose? What motivation? What incentive would Dr. Adam Riorado lead him to lie? And I know the man. He's a good man. And why would I lie? What do I get out of this? For anyone who wants to say I'm a grifter or make money off of this, you don't make money off of this stuff. You put your professional reputation out there. I choose to speak from the heart because I want to be able to sleep at night, because my loyalty on this earth is not to the pharmaceutical industry. This puts my livelihood at risk, and it has since I began talking about it. I place myself vulnerable to all this. No one's making money off of this. By being honest. So you have to ask that question. But there are people that are making money off of this, and this is those who accept pharmaceutical dollars, who their entire profession, the way they make money, is by prescribing these drugs or conducting research. If you have any conflicts of interest, you shouldn't be on a panel like that. And we saw that with Dr. K. I can't remember her last name, but it was just such a dark energy coming off of her, reading the pharmaceutical narrative. I said in the second part, I'm not going to play that for you, but we had some opportunities for debating back and forth. I said I felt like I'm in a time portal and woke up in 1999. I mean, she was repeating the same playbook, the same narrative over and over again, and it was all fear mongering. The idea that your depression is going to harm your baby and not the drugs. Does anyone really believe that? Well, we do because we've created that in consciousness. Like we have doctors saying your depression is going to create maternal fetal stress, and that's what's going to alter the baby. No evidence to support that. God, forget the fact that we've evolved for millennial, and we've been as human beings women have been pregnant in the most adverse situations: war, famine, immigration, being alone without a father who died, her husband that died. I mean, my God, it's like those babies are protective. Your stress, your fetal stress is going to harm the baby. Evil, dark. So they quoted me suggesting depression wasn't an illness, but rather a product of women just naturally experiencing their emotions more intensely, and then smugly added that I made this claim without evidence. The evidence? Like, what, you need a link to tell somebody that like emotions are natural parts of living and we go through pain in this life? Do you need a link to know that these people are being prescribed these drugs and labeled with major depressive disorder because they filled out a checklist that was created by the pharmaceutical companies in 5 to 10 minutes, that there's no context whatsoever? You're not sitting there with an hour and a half, 90 minutes, multiple follow-ups, getting the whole entire picture. We're talking about 8 to 10 minutes, folks. What, you need a link for that? I wasn't dismissing women's struggles. I was defending women against a predatory system that pathologizes their emotional reactions to adverse events. And I believe that those emotional reactions are there to serve them. I do. I think it's a valid indicator of things you're going to need to face in life. And they might even be valid indicators of other medical conditions we need to face. But what happens when you become absolutely disconnected from that? You become sick and you never solve the problem. And that's why you'll stay sick and you'll stay a customer forever, and you're surrendering your autonomy to the medical authority. I was questioning why we're diagnosing emotional responses to real problems as brain diseases that require a drug. Is it that obvious? It's obvious. I put it out there. But NBC couldn't let that narrative survive because it threatens their business model. Their primetime programming is wall-to-wall drug commercials. Their medical correspondents are essentially pharmaceutical spokespeople with journalism degrees. It's ridiculous. This hit job reveals something much, much bigger than just media bias. It shows how the system protects itself when challenged. So think about the playbook. Take the most threatening message out of context. Mischaracterize the messenger as anti-science or dangerous. How do they do that? Well, you call me a podcaster. You don't recognize that I'm a clinical psychologist with 20 years experience. You call me right-wing because I was mentioned on Joe Rogan, or I was on Allie Beth Stuckey's Relatable podcast, or the Cultural Apothecary, right? You just paint me as an extremist without qualification. You ignore all the actual scientific evidence presented. Instead, you just, label it as misinformation. And then you protect that profit stream at all cost. And they did that because my message, that emotional depth, women's emotional depth is a strength, not pathology, that threatens the foundation of a multi-million-dollar industry built on pathologizing normal human experiences and then putting you into conflict with those experiences, creating an internal struggle. If women's tears of their emotions, men too, if they're not symptoms of a mental illness, but rather an energy and natural response to their experiences, if their mood fluctuations aren't brain diseases, but normal rhythms, and we have the capacity to even learn how to regulate them, because I know we do. That's what I've spent my life's work on. If their emotional struggles aren't chemical imbalances, but growth opportunities, certainly requiring support, certainly requiring understanding, even in some cases requiring professional intervention, then Pfizer's stock price becomes a problem. The real coercion I was talking about isn't some conspiracy theory. It's doctors seeing 5 patients per hour to maintain profitability, screening tools designed by pharmaceutical companies to increase positive results, medical training sponsored by drug manufacturers, professional guidelines written by researchers with pharmaceutical conflicts, insurance systems that pay for bills, but not comprehensive care. I'm sorry, insurance systems that pay for pills, but not comprehensive care. And a culture that teaches people to fear their own internal experiences. So this is what this means for you, whether you're a woman considering pregnancy, currently pregnant, or supporting someone who is. Here's what you need to know. So first, you have the right to complete, honest information about these drugs. Not marketing spin disguised as medical advice, but the full picture of risks and benefits. You have the right to know that there are no randomized controlled trials proving these drugs work during pregnancy. If you listen to my podcast, you know my opinion. There has never been studies that have proven that they work. It's easy to manipulate this to create a statistical difference between a placebo and a drug. And then when you conceal very important details about drug reactions, mislabel them, keep people out of your studies, manipulate the study to have the people who are struggling the most not be included. And then when you mischaracterize, and this is the most insidious part, when you rip somebody off these drugs and you induce withdrawal, and then you tell them that is relapse. That is what Dr. K. Ross did not talk about. It's not a relapse. It's pharmaceutical withdrawal, you knucklehead. How can you be so ignorant? How can you be a physician and be so stupid? These are powerful chemical agents that knock you out of homeostasis. You induce a chemical imbalance in the brain that impacts so many aspects of your body. Then the body tries to seek out homeostasis again. There's dependency on this chemical, and then you rip it away again. It completely throws your entire nervous system into chaos. And then you characterize that as relapse? Relapse? My goodness. I mean, how disconnected do you have to be from each other and humanity to take that perspective? I mean, how do you ever trust somebody who can repeat something so absurd, along with the chemical imbalance theory? Absurdity. Thank God people are waking up. You have the right to know that 12 MRI studies show they alter fetal brain development. You have the right to know that we can see changes in fetal movement patterns like on these ultrasounds. You have the right to know that the chemical imbalance theory these drugs are based on was never proven. It's a marketing. God, it's you can tell that there were people up there who were just pharmaceutical salespeople. Even like the energy around it, like there was fear. In fact, the recent comprehensive reviews have found no evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin levels. So clearly you're interfering with something that should not be interfered with. Mess with nature, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. So most importantly, you have the right to trust your own instincts about what's best for you and your baby. Don't let these either ignorant people or these sociopaths coerce you. Okay. It's one or the other, right? One, you're just ignorant. You're just following along, hypnotically repeating the same messages that you were brainwashed by without thought. I mean, I can almost word for word tell you exactly what they're going to say. That's not their own thinking. They're not thinking for themselves. They're not independent. They are repeating marketing messages. So that's ignorance. And then if you do know, and you have studied this, you put the time in, and you prescribe them anyway, then you're detached, you're sociopath. When that voice inside you questions whether exposing your developing child to psychoactive chemicals is the right choice, it's not mental illness talking, right? That's your own internal wisdom. So none of this means abandoning women who are struggling. It just means that we can be open to other ways of supporting women without a pharmaceutical Band-Aid with consequences. So what could an authentic mental health support look like, or other interventions? Well, addressing the root causes of the distress instead of medicating the symptoms, right? Often, like, these are real addressable concerns in relationships, finances, lifestyle. Sometimes the simple fact, and I've learned this myself, when you kind of validate the experience and you get women to like no longer enter into that internal battle with their emotions, well, you begin to self-regulate. I mean, this is you just calm down and you get more attentive to the intuition and the strength that exists within you. So teaching emotional regulation skills instead of emotional suppression, building supportive communities instead of isolating individuals dependent on pills, validating women's emotional experience instead of pathologizing them. How about, a look at lifestyles that include nutrition, sun exposure, movement, exercise, spirituality, all these things that have been necessary, a connection to nature, all these things have been necessary throughout the course of all human history. The anti-human, transhumanist movement wants to detach you from them. How about providing adequate social support during major life transitions, especially pregnancy, motherhood? The tragedy isn't that women struggle emotionally. The tragedy is that we've convinced them that their struggles are evidence of biological defects. This FDA panel was supposed to be about protecting pregnant women and their babies. Instead, it revealed how a captured regulatory system, a compromised media, and profit-driven pharmaceutical industry all work together to suppress inconvenient truths. But here is where I'm optimistic. Something is shifting. People are waking up to the fact that depression rates skyrocket alongside antidepressant prescriptions. They're questioning why emotional pain gets medicated instead of understood. They're wondering why we're chemically altering developing babies without proper warnings or long-term side effects. We're all feeling the fear-based messaging. You can feel it. We all can. The pharmaceutical media complex is starting to get desperate, which is why they're deploying character assassination against anyone who challenges their profitable orthodoxy. Go to the LA Times and see how they presented me. I thought it was fascinating. You can tell, absolutely tell they were threatened. I think they actually spoke about how appealing my message is, because people will be able to sense truth, sense honesty, love. But here's where they don't understand, because every hit piece, every distortion, every attempt to silence dissenting voices only proves how desperately they need to protect their lives. Truth's getting out. Women are reclaiming their right to feel deeply, to trust their instincts, to make informed choices about their bodies and their babies. There's no amount of pharmaceutical propaganda can stop that awakening. It's coming. I know if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're already awake and you can feel this. Send it to somebody who's not awake yet. Keep questioning, keep resisting, and keep demanding better for yourself and our children.